Now we're going to take a look at some federal corruption trials, sadly, in our area and not too unfamiliar. We'll start off on Long Island, where closing arguments, they're set to begin tomorrow. That in the Ed Mangano trial, the former Nassau County executive and his wife Linda, they are fighting several federal charges. They're accused of pay-for-play scheme, including a no-show job for Ms. Linda. Now, in Lower Manhattan, Sheldon Silver federal trial, it wrapped up this past Friday, and there were guilty verdicts on all 7 counts. Dominic, he caught up with Silver and his attorney right after it came down, and they were already talking about retrial.
We are, of course, very disappointed in the verdict. We're confident that at the end of this long battle, we will prevail. We look forward to an opportunity to present our arguments to the appellate court.
Mr. Silver, how are you feeling as a
Mr.
result
Silver,
of the verdict?
describe your emotion right now.
I feel confident in my attorneys, and obviously I'm disappointed at this point, but this is, you know...
It's a long battle, gentlemen.
Well, what more
Right.
can you do?
What more can you do?
On what grounds?
There are significant legal issues, challenging and difficult legal issues that we look forward to presenting on appeal. And folks, thank you very much. I think that's all we're going to
Mr. Silver, wait, Mr.
what
Silver.
is your message to
Mr.
everyone
Silver,
who supported you over all these years?
What's in your heart right now, Mr. Silver? Have you thought about the possibility that you may win on appeal, but that you may be going to prison?
I am very confident that the judicial process will play out in my favor.
Dominic also caught up with 2 of the jurors as they left the courthouse.
How does it feel? I mean, this is a retrial. How are you guys feeling?
There's tears and there's upset, and we worked very hard. But please, it's very emotional, you know.
Yeah, you guys were in there for quite some time. You asked for several
We
notes.
took everything apart, and we didn't agree on anything. Here I am talking. We didn't agree on anything unless we could find the facts. And we all had our notes, but we then went to the computer and looked up all the details. It was difficult.
So you guys...
And the first thing took over 3 hours.
It was difficult. Everything was difficult.
But you guys came back pretty quickly. I'm assuming you feel the government had a good case?
Yes.
Why was it emotional for you, ma'am?
I'm sorry. I just, you know, I tried my best.
Let's bring in our panel. We have Jeannie Zeno with us. Jeannie is a professor of political science at Iona, also a senior advisor at the consulting firm Applied Techonomics. Dominic Carter, political journalist, author. He covered both of the Silver trials and also can speak to Mangano as well. And Andrew Rippon, our senior political correspondent. Before we get into the precedences, where maybe the trend lines are coming out of this, I was surprised, and we were talking about this when we're seeing the SOTs, at how, not just the human side, you saw Silver's voice break there at the end with you, Dominic, but even the jurors and everything else. I think it dawned on them that very possibly Shelley Silver will spend the final chapter of his life behind bars.
No doubt about it. People watch television, and you think, we're used to Law and Order. We're in a day of Law and Order. He's guilty. He's not guilty. Make the arguments. Move on with the life. Next episode. It doesn't work like that in real life. When you're down there at that courtroom, for those jurors, each one of them, the jury forewoman, you are bombarded with cameras. At least 20 television cameras, at least 20 still photographers. And if you're used to a regular lifestyle, Richard, most people are not used to cameras just thrust upon you. How do you feel? I mean, you saw it. I mean,
Yeah.
so...
Again, every case is its own animal, but for the last few years, let's go through this. I mean, there was convictions both for Skelos and Silver, both of them tossed out. We saw Menendez, that they couldn't secure a conviction of him, and he walked. There won't be a retrial for him. But for Coco, we saw a conviction. The retrial of Silver has ended another conviction. We'll see if there's any, a retrial or an appeal that will hold up here. But Mangano, they go to closing arguments tomorrow, Dominic, and then after the sentencing for Coco, you have the retrial of Skelos and then the Buffalo Billions trial. Do you sense a change in public perception when it comes to corruption, the standards to hold lawmakers to, or should we just look at every case as different?
Well, it depends, Richard. I think that the public sentiment is throw them all out and they're all corrupt. I think that's what each jury, and I hope I'm not oversimplifying this, but this is what I really believe the mentality of what they bring into this. What I do think is whether or not, at the end of the day, number one, the feds don't play. You charged by the feds, you got a problem. Number two, I think what determines a lot of these cases, the likability factor. I really do. Because Menendez is very close to Mangano. Gifts exchanged, wealthy person. Remember the Mangano case, I'll be there tomorrow morning. Floors that cost thousands of dollars, vacations, alleged no-show job. But the Manganos are very likable. I am telling you, don't throw that out. The fact that juries, you know, Linda Mangano charged with lying to the FBI, Mrs. Mangano bringing food, you know, so they're very likable. Menendez, very likable. So winning is defined as a hung jury sometimes. Here's what's common in Silver and Skelos, not likable officials. From covering that trial from Sheldon Silver, he didn't have a chance, not a chance in hell from opening arguments.
Not to mention, Skelos had his case overturned on the same appeal that Silver had his overturned on.
Right,
And it seemed like there was more evidence against Skelos than there was
Yes,
Silver going
I
forward.
agree.
I got to wonder if Skelos' attorneys shouldn't be on the phone with the federal prosecutors and being like, maybe there's a deal we can cut here.
And again, it was on, if you want to call it technicality, I'm sure both Silver and Skelos wouldn't agree with that description, but it had to do with jury instructions, Jeannie, after McDonnell. I don't know. I can't. I mean, Dom's there every day covering these, but from the outside, it seems that the public's had it, you know. And you know, unless you can, and I was surprised, Menendez wasn't convicted, and apparently there was 3 or 4 jurors at least who felt that way, but the public has just had it up to here with this.
Yeah, I mean, just look at that list you just showed of the corruption trials that are going on in New York. Dominic, I haven't seen him in studio this entire year. He's been covering trials daily. And then you add to that, and people have disagreed with me publicly, but you add to that the Schneiderman incident recently. And of course, it's not the kind of corruption we're talking about in these trials, but it's another kind of corruption. And I do think that people have to be saying, what is going on in Albany? And one question I have, does any of this come back to haunt Governor Cuomo as he goes up for re-election or he runs for president? Because he ran, what was it now, 8 years ago, on anti-corruption and cleaning up Albany.
Do you really think this is new? You don't think the public has sort of factored
But
this in
have
or
you
priced
seen
this in? Like I assume that there's an assumption that there is some level of this going on all levels of government. The President of the United States has campaigned and won on Drain the Swamp. Now we can have arguments, and we do all the time, about how swampy he's made Washington.
I know, Andrew,
I suspect most people figure it's like
the 3 men in the room, 2 of them have been convicted, and we'll see what happens in the retrial of Skelos if he's going to look into another conviction. But I don't know. To answer Jeannie's question, Dom, I think per Coco, he had the most amount of exposure. And he really didn't come out, the governor, that is that bad. And if anything, in Mangano, you're there. It's de Blasio's name that you hear come up more often than the governor's, right? I mean, there's a host of other elected officials in Long Island that were mentioned on the stand.
No doubt about it. You are correct. Richard, what I'm looking at, what I've seen thus far, is with the McDonald case, the Supreme Court, you know, we initially thought, or I initially thought, that public officials were going to walk now because it was almost impossible to define quid pro quo, they narrowed the definition of corruption. But what I'm actually finding now is no, it's not going down that way. Judges are modifying their charges. That's all that's happening. They're modifying their charges, as Judge Caproni did, because that's why Silver's case was thrown out. And then the juries are still convicting them.
I'm over time, so real short. I asked this question to Andrew and Brodsky and the rest last week. Do you think, as a result of all this, they'll think twice, some of these folks in Albany, before they do it again?
Now, you know I'm the last person on earth to ask that question to.
I can answer for you.
The crooks will never change. You can bring the feds in. Those crooks in Albany will never stop.
All right, and on that optimistic note. All right, we come up. Sports betting. It's becoming legal in New Jersey, so say at the Supreme Court. So the question is New York next? Well, we'll talk about that.